Little Woman fans! Comment shout out goes to Sense and Peace, who writes, at the end of part 2, Jo states that she'll open up a school specifically for boys. I've seen people express their dislike, which I can understand, but at the same time, that is Jo's choice. It's not like Louisa May Alcott was forced by anyone to have Jo teach boys only. This is also another case of how those people see themselves in Jo. There's nothing wrong with relating to her, and use her as a self-insert, yet fail to understand her because you can see how Jo relates more to boys and has an easier time communicating with them. I don't think Jo has any female friends outside of her family. Plus, Jo says this herself to who I believe is Nat in one chapter of Little Man when they talk. The two things she loves are books and boys. Does that make Jo a misogynist for not including girls? Absolutely not. She just happens to have an easier connection with boys as she feels a connection to books. We had a whole conversation about this on Tumblr about the multiple moments in the novel where it is said how much Jo loves boys and how much she loves to take care of boys. There are lots of people who say that Fredrik forced Jo to start a school or Fredrik forced Jo to become a teacher. None of that happens in the novel, so have these people even read Little Woman? In the book, Jo is the one who says that she wants to start a school. In fact, her exact words are, quote, even before I met my Fritz, I used to think how, when I made my fortune and no one needed me at home, I'd hire a big house and pick up some poor, forlorn little lads who hadn't any mothers and take care of them and make life jolly for them before it was too late. I see so many going to ruin for want of help and at the right minute. I love so to do anything for them. I seem to feel their wants and sympathize with their troubles, and oh, I should so like to be a mother to them. End quote. Thing is, Jo is not the one who does the teaching. She runs the school, but she is more than happy to have Fredrik take on the teaching part. The scene in the book where Jo explains her plans on starting the school, she clearly says that what she wants to do is to have a flock of boys that she can nurture, that she can take care of them, and that she can be a mother to them and love them. A lot of people erase the maternal elements from Jo's character. Melodie and I recently made episodes about this. The chapter where Laurie proposes, Laurie cries, he stamps his foot, he throws his fist when Jo says no. He behaves like a 5-year-old, and that behavior, it frustrates Jo, but because she is such a maternal person, she feels bad for him and she wants to comfort him. Jo sees Laurie as her child. A lot of people mix that with romantic love, but Jo was always that way with Laurie. Throughout the book series, she refers Laurie as, quote, first boy she ever raised. This is the same with Louisa May Alcott and Lady Wisniewski. She liked him, but she could not have an adult relationship with him because she was more of a mother than a lover to him. Despite of Jo being a very maternal person, it is being erased entirely from the 2019 film, and it's so odd because the promotion of the movie was all about Greta Gerwig complaining about Fredrik's character and how she wanted Jo either to be happy and with Laurie or to be single, when in reality Louisa May Alcott was not happy alone and she wanted to have a family and love, just not with the real-life Laurie. Jo, in fact, might be the most maternal of all Marchesters. Meg and Beth are also very maternal by nature. Amy is probably the least maternal. Amy becomes a mother, but a lot of people consider Amy to be closest to a modern mother figure. Hello and welcome to the Little Woman podcast. Before entering the podcast, I wanted to let you all know that Little Woman podcast now has merchandise available at society6.com/littlewomanpodcast. There you will find stickers, posters, mugs, and t-shirts to fulfill all your Little Woman needs. Come and check it out. Link is also in the description. And now, to the podcast. She's not like Jo, who is so maternal in a way that she wants to have a huge family that she wants to raise. I think because Amy is not that maternal, actually might be one of the reasons why Laurie falls in love with her, because unlike Joe, Amy refuses to be a mother to Laurie. Joe nannies Laurie, Joe pets Laurie like a child, even when he is an adult, but Amy is Laurie's equal. Little Man is a great book. It appeared in 1870s. I think it was 1871. If you don't want to hear the spoilers, stop now and go to read Little Man. Spoilers begin now. Louisa May Alcott wrote Little Man after the sudden death of her brother-in-law, John Pratt. In Little Man, John Brooks suddenly dies, leaving Meg and his twins behind. When I was younger and I read Little Man, it was a very important book to me. My father died when I was 10. My friends, none of them had lost their parent. I had some friends whose parents had divorced, but that's not the same thing. Little Man became a really important book to me because Daisy and Demi lost their father and they were 10 years old. I could identify with that grief, and John was a very good father, just like my dad was. And I loved Little Man just as much as I loved Little Woman. When Little Man appeared, it was a very popular book, just as popular as Little Woman. I don't know why, but nowadays a lot of people don't even know that Little Woman has sequels. There is Little Man and Joe's Boys. Maybe it's because Little Woman has been adapted so many times. Little Man has also been adapted few times. There are Little Men movies made in 1930s and 1940s. There's a Disney movie from 1990s, and then there is a Japanese Little Men anime. From these, I have seen the film from the 40s. It's very different than the book. The Disney film is pretty okay, the one from the 90s. It takes some liberties with the plot, but I think it has similar warm atmosphere that the book has. Japanese anime is actually by far the closest to the novel, based on the couple episodes I have seen on YouTube. This is Small Umbrella in the Rain, a Little Woman podcast. Good show starting a school for boys. Be a feminist act. It took some time for me to understand why Joe wanted to start a school for boys. When I was a child and I would read the chapter Laurie makes mischief and Joe makes peace, that's where Laurie pulls a very mean-spirited prank and is catfishing Meg. The child me was very upset with him, but I didn't really understood what all it meant. Then I read Little Woman again when I was like 16 or 17, and then I understood that he's actually doing something really disturbing, and I was shocked that Joe didn't say anything. Joe was like, "Oh, my poor Laurie." I think especially women very easily want to ignore when a female character turns a blind eye on a male character. Either I didn't see it or I didn't want to see it, and it took me a very long time to get it. That not only Joe loves boys, Joe adores boys, and Joe also came to realize that there were a set of behavior patterns in boys' world that she did not accept. When Laurie proposes Joe, he basically treats her the same way as he did Meg. When Joe is 15 and she witnesses Laurie's mischief, she thinks it's harmless, but she's actually quite misogynistic. Laurie proposes when Joe is about 26 or 27, and he's blackmailing her to marry him. Joe still has extremely maternal feelings for him. She knows that she doesn't love him romantically, and she knows that she has feelings for Friedrich. She doesn't know yet what kind of feelings they are, but she knows that they are there and they are strong. Laurie threatens to hurt himself, and Joe almost sees him more as her child. She pets his hair and she feels bad for him. Then in Little Man, Joe is in her 30s and she wants to start a school for boys because she loves boys and she understands their inner world, but she also wants to teach her boys to be respectful towards women. She has grown out of her own internalized misogyny. Louisa May Alcott refers to this as a character's growth when they advance in their judge of character, which in Joe's case means moving on from Laurie to Friedrich, and Friedrich in general has more respect towards women than Laurie. Laurie becomes more respectful towards the fairer sex when he moves on from Joe to Amy. When we know this, that Joe wants to start a school for boys, that actually makes perfect sense, and that she wants to teach boys how to treat women is also feminist. There are tons of Alcott schoolers, many who identify themselves as feminist, who wish to erase Joe's love for boys because it ruins their views on Joe, but that Joe wants to teach boys to be more respectful by itself is actually very feminist. Here are some comments about this topic. This from Sense and Peace. Yes, it's not like Joe actively encourages her boys to look down on women once she grows up. All of them turn out to be decent people, and it's not like a boarding school for boys or girls no longer exists anymore even in America. Joe is a good feminist character for multiple reasons. Schoolers need to accept that feminist characters have flaws just like all of us. Accepting Joe can feel quite misogynistic, can be difficult, but it wasn't Louisa May Alcott's intention to write women without flaws. Why do they think there are 4 consecutive chapters on each of the sisters' flaws? And erasing her internalized misogyny she had as a teenager undermines her character growth. At least schoolers that identify as a stan of the other sisters don't try to erase their respective flaws. This is from the Other Art blog. Quote, "They were taught not to be ashamed of showing their emotions." How amazing is this? She wrote this in the 1870s. Today we are still battling with that. The boys at Plumfield were taught to be good, responsible, hard-working men. They had the influence of the women and the girls, just like Laurie did, but also they had Fritz, John, the same Laurie and Mr. March, and for the most part it worked. Here's a quote from Princess Arisa. "I am another reader who sees nothing wrong or anti-feminist about Joe starting a school for boys. She should have started a school for girls and taught them to be strong and independent like herself, some critics say. But that's just not realistic. Not for the time period. If she had started a school for girls, she would have been forced to teach them to be proper ladies, and if she didn't, then the school would have failed. Running a school for boys gives her the freedom to be her gender non-conforming self while still filling a role that her society accepts. The fact that it gives her the power to teach boys to respect women and not become playboys, like Laurie almost became, or worse, only makes it better." End quote. Little Man's leading character is a boy called Nat. I don't think they ever refer him with his full name, so I guess it's Nathaniel or Nathan. He is a 12-year-old orphan boy when he arrives to Plumfield. He is very sensitive and a musician, and there are lots of parallels between him and Laurie. What Nat really is looking for is a parental figures, and Joe and Fredrik become that to him. When I would read Little Man for the first time, Nat was my absolutely favorite character. I loved him. Now when I am reading Little Man as an adult, I see that I almost felt this maternal need to take care of him. That is another parallel to Laurie. Nat is a dreamer. His head is in the clouds. He's not very grounded. When I have spoken with other Little Woman fans for this podcast, many have told me that they had similar maternal feelings for Laurie. This is a repetitive theme in Louisa May Alcott's novels. There are male characters who can take care of themselves and want to be on equal footing with the woman they love, like Mac and Fredrik. Then there are male characters who need some sort of female guidance to get their life straight. This is another example of misreading Louisa May Alcott. A lot of people dismiss that now as non-feminist, but these books were written in the 19th century, so it is also criticism towards mistreating of women when woman is being given this pressure to make decisions that a man can't make themselves. That's a direct parallel to Laurie's proposal to Joe when he basically asks her to make all his future life decisions for him so that he doesn't need to do anything. Nat has a very similar storyline. Laurie ends up with Amy, who doesn't scold him constantly, but inspires him to grow, to be the hero of his life. Nat falls in love with Daisy, who is Meg's and John's daughter, and Daisy is a very grounded and realistic type of girl. She and Amy are both very practical. Daisy and Nat won't get together until the last book, Joe's Boys, but Little Man does foreshadows their relationship. Quote, "Daisy had a great love for music and a great reverence for anyone who could make it, and she was often found sitting on the stairs outside Nat's door while he was practicing. She never would come in, but preferred to sit sewing her gay patchwork or tending one of her many dolls with an expression of dreamy pleasure on her face that made Aunt Jo say, with tears in her eyes, "So like my Beth," and go softly by, lest even her familiar presence should mar the child's sweet satisfaction. End quote. This is the great contradiction of Jo's character. People at large know that she is a tomboy, but she is incredibly maternal figure. In her essay, Toys, Games and Play in Louisa May Alcott's Little Woman, Anne K. Phillips mentions that Louisa May Alcott's mother, Abba Alcott, had a custom to invite the young men of the neighborhood to spend the evenings at the Alcott's home, providing healthy entertainment so that they would not fall into unhealthy temptations. What those temptations would have been during those times: drinking, hanging out in billiard halls, company of ladies who were not considered proper. In the 1994 Little Woman, you see Laurie flirting with women, but it's after Jo has dumped him, so you get the feeling that he's just acting out. But in the novel, Laurie loves flirting with women, and he does that years before he proposes Jo, and Jo is really annoyed by this. Not because she is jealous about Laurie or anything, she doesn't think that flirting is proper, and Jo doesn't know how to flirt. We can see that in the Under the Umbrella chapter, when she is so in love with Fredrik and she is almost desperate because she doesn't really know how to express her interest. Flirting wasn't considered proper at those times, and when Amy travels to Europe, she actually makes a promise to Marmee that she is going to be proper and will not be flirting. But there are no Little Woman adaptations where you see Laurie flirting and doing all these things that the sisters considered non-proper. I think Amy was the one who was the least preachy about his actions, but even Amy has her limits. Nat and Laurie are also similar when it comes to their physical appearance. They are both written to be very effeminate, skinny, androgynous guys. In Little Man, the narrator refers both of these boys as girly because of the way they look, and they are incredibly sensitive, but also because they can be unproductive and walk heading the clouds. There are lots of filmmakers and Alcott schoolers who say that Jo must be gay or an asexual because she doesn't think Laurie is sexually attractive, which is quite dismissive to Jo's character, not to mention hers and Fredrik's relationship, but that doesn't either align with the book's narrative. In the same scene where Nat and Laurie are called girly, the narrator says that Mrs. Jo liked, quote, manly boys. It does remind me of that note in Louisa May Alcott's journals where she compares Henry David Thoreau to Napoleon. I have read way too many Alcott studies where it is said that Jo marries an unattractive man who is not sexual, and they always rephrase that either Jo is gay or that Jo should be with Laurie because Laurie is more erotic. When Laurie proposes Jo in the book, he behaves like a toddler. He throws his hat to the ground and stamps on it. Also, all these studies, they never talk about the maternal feelings that Jo has for boys. So for Jo being in a relationship with Laurie, and she is like his surrogate mother, it is once again quite dismissive to Jo's character, and we know that the real-life Laurie, Lady Wisniewski, called Louisa May Alcott as his little mother. I can only speak for myself. I couldn't be in a romantic relationship with somebody who would call me mother. Fredrik and Jo, they do have quite many passionate scenes in Little Woman series. There is a very non-proper kissing scene in the Under the Umbrella chapter. He is Jo's sexual awakening in New York. There are kissing scenes in Little Man and Jo's Boys. Little Man has the afterglow scene, and in Jo's Boys there is a full making out session between them, which every anti-Jo and Fredrik person should read before saying that Jo wasn't into him. Every time when I read it, it feels like they want to run upstairs and tear their clothes off. I'm still very surprised that Louisa May Alcott was able to publish that in a 19th century children's book. Why there are thousands Alcott studies which say that Jo wasn't into Fredrik at all, when obviously she was? I don't know. I guess they don't read the book, or maybe they are just mad that Jo didn't end up with Laurie. It's really tiring to read that time and time again when you know that there are lots of Jo and Fredrik making out scenes in Little Woman. Here's one of the kissing scenes from Little Man. This is the moment when Jo finds Dan from the barn. So Dan is Jo's favorite student. This is the conversation between Jo and Fredrik, what they are going to do about it. Quote, "My dear, I hadn't the heart to scold him, and just took him in like a poor little black sheep come back to the fold. I may keep him, Fritz." "Of course you may. This proves to me that we have a hold on the boy's heart, and I would no more send him away now that I would my own rob." Dan heard a soft little sound as if Mrs. Joe thanked her husband without words. End quote. Little Man, a chapter home again. Louisa May Alcott, 1871. There are people who say that Jo gives up on writing when she marries and starts a school, and even worse, there are people like Greta Gerwig who say that Friedrich is a terrible bully who forces Jo to stop writing. I have no idea where they got that idea, because that doesn't happen in the novel. Honestly, I don't think she has even opened Little Woman. When Jo was in New York and she was writing sensational stories, she didn't like writing them. In the book it says that Jo had anxiety attacks for writing those stories. We know that Louisa May Alcott also wrote gothic thrillers, and some of them she liked and others were a struggle, because her desire to grow as an author did not align with the magazine where she was working. And in Little Woman, this magazine is Weekly Volcano, and the editor, Mr. Dashwood, is a caricature of Frank Leslie, Alcott's real-life editor, whose agenda she at some point started to question. I made an